So welcome to the May 25th meeting of the Nagog Hill Orchard Work Group. This is an official meeting, though most of it's to listen to you folks, but we do need to take roll call and do those things. So we're going to start with that.
Jen Clancy here.
Brad Mitchell here.
Matthew Nordhaus.
Sarah Stewart here.
Amy Tarla Lewis here.
Great. So we do have a quorum. I'm going to turn over to Sarah with the welcomes and kind of the ground rules.
Excellent. Good to go. First, we'd like to welcome everyone to our first of hopefully many meetings. My name is Sarah Seward, and I am the Conservation Commission Chair representative on the committee. So what we have for you tonight is we hope to be here till 8. Amy has spent hours on our slide presentation, so we'd like to do that for 30 minutes, followed by question and answer, and then feedback as well. So a couple house rules. We ask that if you do have your cell phone to silence that. So as order, what we'd like to do is that when you have a question we prefer to use the mic, but there are mics up here as well. Please state your name and your address. We'd like to have everybody circulate through one question before we start to come back to the same people to ask questions again. Brad is working with the Zoom tonight, so there are people that are here virtually that will ask questions as well. We do ask that we're going to wait till the very end for all questions, so that way Amy can breeze right through with the slides. The slides have a lot of information. We will make the slide deck available to you later, so it'll be on the website. So don't think you have to take furious notes or try and mesmerize what's up there as well. So here we go, Amy.
Great. Thank you for that. You can hear me? Okay. Great. So we thought the first thing we would do is sort of tell you where we've been and where we are tonight. So I'm not going to read everything on the slide, but the first working group meeting started the fourth quarter, the fall of 2021. We then did we had a UMass come and do an assessment of the orchard. They have an apple orchardist there, John Clemens, he's been here twice. We did some pruning, an initial pruning of the most viable sections of the apple orchard. And then we quickly moved into a request for proposal process, where we defined the attributes of the kind of applicants we were looking for. And at that time, the requirement was that they would have to lease the property. We posted it for 30 days. We had no responses. We posted it again, and then we got only one response. At that time, the town moved into negotiations with them. And then over the summer, Park and Rec did some mowing, and UMass came again. We unfortunately had a water main break in the house. And then unfortunately by 2023, second quarter, the negotiations with a bidder ended. So the working group started up again. And at that time, Cindy Napoli had left the Board of Select, and Matthew had joined, and then Brad Mitchell had joined our committee. And so we kind of started up again, thinking about, well, what should we do from this point? We only had one person interested. And then we started to do a land appraisal for the parcel so that we'd understand what its value was. We also then began doing what's called a request for information. And basically what that is, we asked basically 4 very broad questions for applicants to respond to. It was basically market research. And what the market research ultimately told us is that people are looking to purchase the property, not to lease it. And we're going to get into more about why purchasing the property is the most financially viable route for farmers. It was made public, and then the RFI closed, and then here we are at the community update meeting. At this point, the group is looking to develop what's called the request for proposal, which will be a more in-depth application, and it will lay out the criteria which will ultimately drive the types of applicants that we want to see. And there'll be a lot of pragmatic criteria in it, and then there'll be some secondary criteria, which is more community focused. And the goal is to have a farmer in place to begin the 2025 season, because the process has to coincide with the growing season as well. So, great. So now I wanted to go over a little bit about what is a agricultural preservation restriction for those who don't know. as a program that is run by the Massachusetts Department of Culture. And I think, Brad, it was started in the 1970s or 1980s.
It just had its 40th anniversary a couple of years ago.
Yep. And the reason why we have an agricultural preservation program in the state is because, as you know, we lose farmland all the time. And farmland in New England, especially Massachusetts, is incredibly expensive. And so the goal of the program is to keep agricultural land in agriculture in perpetuity and to be affordable for farmers. So that is the reason for it. And it is a state law. You cannot use it for, housing. You can't use it for apartments. You can't put like a Cumberland Farms on it. And basically what happened was the town paid the difference between their market value of the land. They sold the development rights for the agricultural value. And again, it can only be used for agricultural uses. The APR program does monitor the program, and depending on what you want to do on the property, there are times that you do need to get basically a permit to do something, like if you wanted to put a greenhouse up. I don't know what are the other reasons why they need permission.
Pretty much any building, any non-ag or quasi-ag use.
Yeah, so it is controlled and regulated and an overseen program.
I'm going to go next.
Next. Okay, great. So I know everyone has a lot of concerns about the APR being removed from the property or sold somehow. So basically it's just not possible. Theoretically it is, but it would take an act of God for that to happen. The town would need to approve a move like that. You need, from the Senate, a supermajority vote. You would need a 2/3 of both the House and the Senate. And then in this year, the state made it even harder to remove an ARP from a piece of land. You would now need to go through all of these steps, which would be very rigorous. They would delay and push back forever. And then the other big piece of it, which is really sort of like the nail in the coffin, is that you need to find another piece of land, another piece of agricultural land to switch it to. So there's no net loss. Where are you going to find 50 acres of agricultural land that's available in Littleton? Nowhere. So next slide. Okay. So the property is pretty complicated. We have agriculture restriction land, we have town conservation, other conservation, and exclusions from the property. And so these dark gray areas are the areas that have the agricultural preservation restriction on them. And then you have the barn here and the house here. The agricultural preservation restriction program is only about farmland. It's not about dwellings, it's not about barns. However, because Brad has an extensive relationship with the Department of Agriculture, he's worked really hard to get to agree to pull the barn to the APR, so they'll be permanently protected. But they won't let us put the house in, pull the house in. You can also not build a dwelling on APR property. That is also not allowed. So the other pieces of land are conservation land. You can't sell the conservation land. They have a conservation restriction. They're not going anywhere. We do have, and Sarah, if I get this wrong, tell me, this piece of property right here where the lower barn is, that piece of land, if a farmer wants to, they can lease lower barn and they can lease some land to farm on, but it can't be sold to them, right? And an applicant could say, I only want the APR land, I want nothing to do with these other parcels, because with the leased piece, the barn and the land, you have to pay prevailing wage to the workers who work there. The town would have to upfront the money to fix that lower barn, which will not be cheap. So these are the agricultural preservation current values, which is different from a residential value or commercial value, because back in 1999, the Morrison family sold the development rights. So, next slide. here's sort of an inventory of what's in the property. So the USDA estimated about 5,000 trees, another 500 stone fruit trees, if I'm correct, Sarah. It had some sheds on the property, on the APR land. There is a well. We had someone come, they put in a pump. It does pump out water, but it needs to have a pump installed. There was an irrigation system. It's no longer functional. And the APR land adds up to 48.64 acres. So again, the residential structure in the barn, in the lower barn, in the cottage, that's at that really scary, dangerous curve where the Sullivan family lives, is not in the property. However, we will be bringing in the main barn into APR. We just need to make that happen.
A verbal commitment from DAR.
Yeah, a verbal commitment. All right, next, great. So here is our progress and some of the challenges that we face. So we need to have we've had regular assessments of the orchard. Welcome Karen Morrison, our other board select member. We have a request for proposal that was sent out. That was the initial one that we did. Negotiations, we've done some pruning. Park and Rec and DPW are doing the mowing. DPW is going to continue to do the mowing this summer. We have successfully been able to add a line item to the budget, which is really critical because one of the concerns is why is the orchard, the structures in such bad condition? The reason is because there was never a line item in the budget and we never spent any money on it, ever, as a town. But now we have a line item and we have a little bit of money in it to do some very basic patchwork. We had one request for information applicant who did do a soil test. There was really no concern. But I do really want to remind people, it's basically a 50-acre property. You can do a soil test in one spot. Everything's fine. Everything's great. And then you can do a soil test like 5 feet away, and it can give you very different results. But there you go. That's one small piece of data. We had the land valuation done this year. We've had 15 applicant submissions, and the majority is looking to purchase. So the challenges are very real. We have fire blight on the property. All the houses and outbuildings need significant repairs. The house was flooded. Well and irrigation are not functional, which obviously, as you know, is very critical for a farmer to have irrigation. The majority of the trees are no longer viable as a commercial operation. I know you see like leaves on them and a few trees. That doesn't make a business, right? It's not, you can't produce enough apples from it. And obviously the challenges to any farmer anywhere, especially New England, is access to capital and access to land. To start a farm business, it's going to require a significant amount of money to get going. Right. So the barriers to entry are if someone was to purchase it, they need to get a mortgage on the house plus the repairs. If they were to lease, they'd have to pay rent, but no one wants to lease it. There's taxes. There's a huge investment in cash to rebuild the infrastructure. There's a number of years just to remediate and to rebuild, which is going to take a long time so people can get up and running. You need to have the startup cash. You need to have the tools and the equipment. Farming is not cheap. Tractors are not cheap. And you need time to realize the return on investment. And you're going to need a number of years before you become profitable. This farm, whoever comes, will not be profitable easily for 5 years. They're going to be putting a lot of money into the property, and it's going to be a huge investment. Great. So economic factors leading to purchase. And if I'm talking too fast, someone send me the signal.
You're good.
All right. So the history of the town has had a very record of managing the land. The job of the town is to run the municipality. It's not to be farmers or managing farm leases. There's no skill, there's no capacity, there's no interest in doing that. And it's such a poor state of the property, is such a poor state, the town is not interested in making the investments. We're talking like millions of dollars of investment into that property. So there's the cost of doing everything. And if it's leased, the person has to pay prevailing wage. And when you consider, like, think about, like, how many tomatoes do you need to sell to put gas in your car, pay your cell phone bill, which is part of your business, pay your, you know, your mortgage, pay your loans, get shoes for your kids, you know, and then you have to pay your workers very high salary. That's really difficult in farming to do. So, moving on. So, top applicants. So we had 4 who wanted to lease it. 1, we were going to offer a lease to purchase, but the town no longer kind of wants to go through that hassle. We had 2 people who submitted but didn't clarify either way. And then we had 8 folks who wanted to purchase the property. So so at this point, we have the applications. We are not screening anyone in or out. However, we looked at those applications and we said, basically, who are the strongest applicants so far, and what are the characteristics? So the strongest characteristics were number of years of farming, the size of the current property that they're currently farming on. They have multiple income streams throughout the year, existing channels of sales, they own farm assets, they can access capital. We asked them to kind of lay out a vision of how they would sort of come to the property, make repairs, start their farm, that their vision was actually really believable and achievable from a farm agricultural space, and that they had community benefits. So, all right. So I want to talk a little bit about what a successful farm looks like. All right. So I don't like using this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. So when we're all really little, our parents all read us storybooks about farms, right? We were all sort of, I'm going to use the word, indoctrinated. This is what a farm looks like. It's beautiful. The kids are playing in the hayloft. They're swinging on the rubber tire. Grandma's baking a pie, right? That is not a farm. This is a farm. Farms are businesses, and they act like businesses. They're run by a team of people who have diversified skills. You've got, you know, person has their technical skills. You have the person who does your HR and your bookkeeping and payroll. You have your agronomist. You have the person that deals with your irrigation. You're the person who does their CSA, who's going out and doing sales, working with restaurants. It's a business, and they are first and foremost run as businesses, right? Next slide. All right. So what will the request for proposal process look like? So this is where I think some of my fellow members also feel like, this is the most important place for the community to get involved, because this will be the place where we set the criteria for the people who could actually possibly take this farm over, like what we want from them, like, right? So that's really where the power comes from the community. Come to our meetings. We are going to offer up to 2 additional seats on the working group. The select board gave us that permission this week. We are going to have the Metropolitan Planning Council come in and like run some sessions for us to take the weight off this volunteer group of people. We have hired an outside consultant who will actually do the writing for us. He's an expert. He knows what to do. He knows RFP stuff, he knows procurement stuff, he knows legal stuff. They're going to do the writing. So we're going to give them our criteria and our vision, and he's going to put it in writing for us. We will obviously be drafting it. It will be a public document. And at the very end, and I know this is where people's big concern is, we will have an open joint public hearing with the select board and the working group on making final decision. And I want to be super clear about this, people. This property is like, it's like a yacht. It's just like sucks your money out, right? Like, we are not going to get a lot of applicants. Like, the request for information, there's no commitment. They weren't actually, you know, it wasn't actually like a place where they could actually purchase or lease. Like when these people see this application and their criteria, first and foremost, about their business and what we expect, there's not going to be a lot of applicants. We're
hopeful, though.
Yeah, it will not be big. And when we look at them, it will be a very small group. I'm talking like 2 or 3 potential applicants that we may be picking from. These are people who have access to a lot of money, who have a lot of farm experience. So yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about what delay in this process means. So it's further depreciation of the property, deterioration of the structures, which, you know, the town's not looking to fix them. They're looking to patch them. There's always a risk of vandalism. You know, we do have some really qualified RFI candidates, and we're really hoping that they will apply to the RFP, but there's no guarantee. And I also want to make this super clear. There's other farmland in Massachusetts that is far less complicated than this to purchase. So, you know, we are competing with other pieces of that they can go to. We would have to wait to 2026 because, again, this process is based on farming season because spring doesn't wait. There's the cost of mowing from DPW. We have extra policing happening there, cost of the town administration, continued patches and repairs, and also, most importantly, we are currently not compliant with APR program with the state. Brad has been doing a super job talking to them. They know we're working on this. The rule is, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, you need to, if you're not farming for more than 2 years, you're out of compliance. Is that correct?
I don't know if there's a specific number, but three. Yeah.
3 years. So we are out of compliance. And they're looking for us to get back into compliance. So here's our goals for 2024.
Maybe?
Yep.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Yep. So we have, I'm not going to read this, but here we are. We're about to go to town meeting. We're asking this, the town to approve for that land to be declared as surplus, and that the board has the legal right to sell the property, because currently the select board only has the legal right to lease the property, but leasing is not like economically viable. No one is going to lease that property. It has to be sold, and so we need to give the select board permission to do that. We're not voting on an applicant. I've heard that rumor. We are not there yet. And then once that happens, if the town votes yes, we will start the RFP process, and then we'll go through the process, they'll negotiate, and hopefully we'll have a farmer in place by 2025. Done. So,
that's great.
So here we are. So we are not really gonna, are we gonna take questions first?
Yeah. So if you want, take a breath, relax. So I think what we would like to do now is to go ahead and open up for, I'd like to go through questions first and then kind of go through just comment seconds as well. And for those of you that came in a little bit later, we do ask that you state your name and your address and your question. We'll go through everyone, let everyone have a chance to ask their first questions before we jump into a second one.
Hi, Vince Stolo, 3 Sarah Dublin. Thank you for putting such a nice presentation. There was talk about having the Metropolitan Planning Commission come in. Not really familiar all much with who they and what they do, but I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and what the benefit is of what their role is.
Yeah, I don't know if they're a nonprofit or the actual structure is, but they're a regional planning entity that helps different towns do stuff around planning. So Marin Hill, our town planner, uses them a great deal as a consultant. If they need, for example, to spell out the details of the MBTA, parcel, they would come in and look at that. They've helped us with, I think they helped us with the cannabis overlay district, and they have a lot of experience in running public hearings and public meetings and get input from people in the town. And in fact, we originally approached them to ask them if they would help us with the RFP, and they said that they are not good at that, but that they actually just proactively offered to help run public sessions for us, be something that they do.
Thank you.
No questions? Anyone online?
Go ahead.
That piece of property, if you're standing, looking at Nagog Pond with the barn to the left, is not farm property. what is that and who owns it?
And so, great question, and I can take that. So, looking back, so as you're close to the reservoir, it is under care, custody, and control of conservation right now. You have the barn, the cottage, and then a little strip of land, and the land out back. That had been used for lease, and so that would be available for lease at some point. That is under a municipal overlay right now. So we could use that as lease, but that's on the table for any type of sale.
Nothing to do with that.
Yep. So no, we're not talking only up the road a little.
The same farmer could lease it, but at this point, we're focused on that. We have a couple people online. Karen O'Neill, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Hold on, Karen, we've got some tech problems. I don't think we can hear you very well here.
Judy?
Judy?
All right, well.
Can somebody knock on the door to AV? There we go.
Okay. Okay, try again.
Okay, Karen O'Neill, 63 Great Road.
No.
Nope, sorry, Judy, it's still not, I mean, Karen, it's still not working. Apologies.
You might have to yell or put
I'm
the
not-
mic on.
Okay, never mind.
No, that's turned down.
It's not coming from here,
Yeah,
so.
but then he's going to get the
Okay.
feedback.
All right.
Well, let's give it a shot. Try and speak loudly and see. You all might be able to hear better than us. Brad, do you want to tell her to go ahead?
What am I?
Yeah, ask her to try again. Speak loudly.
I didn't take her off, so she should still be muted. I don't see her. Carrie McHugh, we're going to try you and then Cindy.
Okay, sure. This is Carrie McHugh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. I live at 13 Neshoba Road, so I'm really close to this orchard. And I like what I'm hearing so far about it. I have not really so much question, and it might be a premature statement, but one of my biggest concerns is kind of just to be candid, toxic chemicals that are going to be brought in with any kind of agricultural, farming situation. And I would love to get someone in here who's going to do organic stuff and, sustainable stuff
Have a
and,
conflict of interest.
stuff that's healthy for us all to breathe in the town and good for the planet. And I know from what you're saying that it's going to be hard to even basically get rid of this property. But is that something that's even being talked about right now, is want to make sure that whatever gets done is actually going to be healthy in terms of the air and water for our community? We're not even close to thinking about that right now.
So I think that obviously very valuable insight, and we thank you for that question. That's something that would go as we're developing points of reference and interest. That's something that will add to our list of what's going to be implemented in the RFP criteria. We obviously know that looking at agriculture, there may be some opportunities for things to have some type of pesticide or herbicide or such come in to make that we don't know that we're looking at an organic farming operation. But that's certainly what we're doing tonight, is collecting comments and feedback so that way we have a focus for criteria for the RFP. Like, that made sense. Thank you.
And if it, obviously we don't know if the people who applied to the request for information will actually apply to the RFP, but, the folks that we consider our candidates, they're doing either organic or regenerative practices or very, very low chemical use, using organic certified products. So, you're going to be better off with this farmer than the orchard, because orchards use, 13, 15 different types of chemicals. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that personally.
We've got a couple people online who've had their hands up. Cindy, I'm going to ask you to unmute if you want to go, and then Melissa, and then Joanne.
Hi, Cindy Higgins, 14 Trot Road. Is it restricted to a certain type of farming? In other words, could it turn into a dairy farm?
I'll answer that question. So when the Morrisons were here, they had cows, there were sheep there were chickens there were goats there. There were geese. Given the where the dairy industry is today, As you probably know from Littleton's history, Littleton used to have a lot of dairy farms, and now there's only one. It's the Pickard family. Will also sits on this committee. He's out milking with actually my kid. There's no way anyone's going to start a dairy farm. Like, it's too hard. Milk is a commodity product. You're competing with huge farms out west. And then you have companies like Walmart that have just started their own dairy farm so they can vertically integrate. We have an oversupply of milk, and I would love to eat 6 gallons of ice cream a day, but there's too much product on the market, and with people, consumer demand shifting. For a while ago, cottage cheese was really popular, and it's not, and then butter was super evil, and now butter's back. So we have plant-based milks, and so no one's going to start.
Well,
But the question, I think what I heard also was, is it restrictive to certain types of agriculture? So you can't have a equine boarding facility. We know you can't have cannabis there, but there are, under the APR program, there's actually great information on the town website that talks about what is allowed and what is not allowed for types of farming and agriculture.
You can't have a piggery.
Yep.
So it doesn't preclude a piggery, but the town has rezoning the ability to stop a piggery if they want to. Next question, Melissa, I'm going to ask you to unmute. And Cindy, if you're done, and put your hand down because I'm easily confused. Melissa.
You all keep cutting out. Did you say Melissa?
Yep, Melissa, go ahead. If you could state your name and address, please.
Yeah, hi. My name's Melissa Crow, 52 Nagog Hill Road. And I'm going to ask a question you want me to. I've followed what you're doing, understand why you've come to your conclusion that sale is the most probable, optimal solution. One thing that I don't think you've addressed, another totally different option is for the town to hire a property manager and a farmer to hire, pay them, and I know it would require funding, but to actually fund startup of the farm and maintain it in good faith because we bought it from the Morrisons to run it, and keep it. I know it wouldn't be, hopefully at some point it wouldn't be a financial drain, but it would definitely be a benefit to the community to maintain it as an orchard, many reasons. And I just want to hear a real brief, did you really consider that, or is that even on the plate that you're going to consider? Thank you.
I would do fiscally.
Sure, I'll take a crack at that. One of the things that we hear on the select board a great deal is the cost of living and the taxes going up. And we're talking about several $1 million at least, I would say, over the course of a few years that we would have to invest. And the same problems that go with us actually directly managing the farm go with us hiring someone to manage the farm. We don't have bandwidth to do it. We don't have someone dedicated to it. We don't have the expertise to know whether the person who's running the farm is doing a good job or a bad job. To some degree, and to a large degree, that was the downfall of the orchard when the last tenant was there. We did not have oversight that we needed, and we didn't have the expertise to have the oversight. So I think we would be getting into a big mess of obligations that I don't think the town administration and the town boards want or are good at, and I don't think the residents want to pay for it because it would be a substantial cost.
And then it's the ongoing cost, every year you have to sink money into your investments, into your operation, and expanding your operations. We're talking millions of dollars, $500,000 a year, $1 million a year, or more in perpetuity.
Joanne, then Charisse, then Raymond, then the gentleman in the back. Joanne?
Should I use the mic?
If you prefer, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, going back to that first person's question where they asked about keeping it organic or minimizing chemicals, like, don't orchards use like arsenic and lead, and can't that like accumulate and stay in the soil for a long time? And I know one person tested one spot, but this is a big orchard. If the new owner should find that it is contaminated with arsenic and lead and they can't produce food there, isn't that a way to get out from under the burden of the APR? Like, could the APR be subverted if that were to be found the case, a lot of lead and arsenic?
Thank you. We're going to let Brad take
And
that.
I'm Joanne Deary from Harwood Avenue.
Thank you.
So lead arsenate was used pretty heavily on orchards until probably the 1960s and 70s. It's typically found in orchards around the drip line of the trees, and especially where mixing and loading and storage takes place. The way state law works is it wouldn't kick the land out of farmland because it's there. What would trigger was the mass contingency plan if you changed uses from orchard to something else. Now, that said, I've done a little bit of research on certain crops. They don't have acceptable thresholds for lead in crops in the soil because it varies for the crop. Leafy greens take some others. So I think anybody who moves in needs to look at that, and that's a consideration of what they put in and where they put it. So leafy greens, for instance, will take up lead and arsenic, lead anyway. Personally, I don't think arsenic is big an issue. We have a natural vein arsenic going right through there. But this is an issue, so leafy greens and things, before you planted a lot of those, if that's what they were going to do, they would want to test. But it would be up to them. Right now, there's not a lot of oversight on that, regulatory oversight.
So they can't get out of the APR?
No.
Everyone, and even the people, if I may interject, during the RFI process, we made it open that if someone wished to come in, and we did have one applicant come in and kind of looked where that person wanted to test, and that's the data that we had. They were gracious enough to share it with us. And so anyone that is now part of the next process, I would hope that we would give them the same latitude to come in and test if they wish to do so.
And we'll, of course, disclose, like we obviously disclose not only that, but, you know, if they were interested in the house, there might be lead paint in the house, there might be asbestos in the house. All that will be very clearly conveyed to the applicants.
Yeah, which is why, if I could, which is why we're trying to rely on experts for this part of the process, especially, right? We're going to be looking to our town council, we're going to be looking to our consultant who's going to be drafting the RFP to help us know what needs to be disclosed and when, and what rights various buyers would have at once.
And if someone was looking to start an organic farm, nothing has been sprayed or done on that property for over 4 years, and it has to be either fallow or nothing sprayed for a minimum of 3 years to start the organic certification process. So it's already like on track to be this organic farm. Someone wished to.
Brad?
I'm trying to, okay. Therese, I'm trying to, there you go. Therese, if you could speak, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name.
It's pretty close, thank you. This is Shari Susakian. I'm at 5 Nhowg Hill. First, I just want to say...
Sorry, it's a little faint in here. The louder you can speak, the better off I think.
Okay, I'll speak as loud as I can. I'm at 5 Nagog Hill. I want to thank all of you for all the work you've been doing for so long. I have a question that I kind of consider a safety question. Of course, there's no way to know if you'd have any orchards that would be submitting an application to the RFP, but would you be accepting requests for proposals that include a business on site that would be serving alcohol?
Well, yeah, because we looked at storm law.
It's not out of question. There would be additional complications as far as the permits for actually constructing or issuing alcohol, but we were talking about with our previous RFP respondent, they were planning on doing a cider tasting room. And so I think that it is a possibility. What you would not see there is a bar, right? Or a package store. Like, that's not acceptable. The only acceptable versions of alcohol are something that's related to the agricultural use of that property. So cider is a great example. Maybe they plant a vineyard to start making wine, but nothing more intensive than that.
No, if the state honors their verbal agreement to take the barn and that associated piece of property into the APR, I think that would largely preclude some of the wineries and breweries that might want to go in, because that's not allowed on APR property, would only leave them with a house. And we still have zoning issues. Raymond, I'm asking you to unmute. If you could unmute, you're next. There we go.
Hi, I guess the big question is...
Hey, Raymond, if you could speak up, please give us your name and address.
Raymond O'Neill, 30 Pickard Lane, Littleton, Mass. Did you hear that?
Yep.
Go
ahead.
I guess I was a little confused as to the meeting. The big picture is that land is always going to be owned by the town of Littleton. Am I correct? Or as the open
I'm
space?
sorry, Raymond, we're having difficulty hearing you.
I think his question was, the land was always supposed to be owned by the land was always supposed to be owned by the town. That was the Morrisons kind of.
No, that's not the question. It's always going to be open space.
What's going to happen with open space?
Could you repeat your question, sir?
Land, whatever happens with the sale, will always be open space. It's not going to be developed for housing.
That is correct. It would not be developed for housing. When we talk about open space, I want to be clear, though. So there are farmers that use APR land that do not allow the public on property for obviously safety reasons, or if someone has a small herd, they don't want dogs running in. So sometimes there's a different understanding of open space versus development as well. So we can attest that there will be no housing development on that property.
It has to stay a farm, basically. It needs to remain in agriculture.
But conservation land can still be logged.
Did you want to?
We're not talking about conservation.
Okay.
Sir, in the back, you had a question, Paul.
George Sanders, 672 Great Wood. I have a few concerns here. One is, how much did the town pay for this property?
14.5 million. And then it was 2.9.
It's been that long, so we don't even know that, huh?
No, we know that.
No, sir, so what happened was the Morrisons gave us a very, very reduced price. It was estimated to be 14 million. We paid over 2 million. We received some grant money from APR and from self-help. So your question is, what did we pay in 1999 and 2000, and then the money that we got in from that? We can give you a whole breakdown of that.
So basically, you tell me now, how much money did the town have invested in that property?
Originally in the year 2000, when we bought it, or ever since then?
I want to say it was 2.6 million.
It was like 2.6, 2.9.
Yeah. So without getting the grants, it was over 2.5 million.
How much money do we have on the current budget in the town for that property?
$0 for fiscal year 24. We have a line item, I think, of $100,000 for fiscal year 25.
100,000 for 25. First, I'm commending you for the job that you've been doing here and over the years that you've been doing it. I think you came to the conclusion we need to sell this property because it will be a drain on the budget to try to bring it up to par. And we're probably lucky that the state hasn't been on our back to put this back active as to according to what they said that those properties should be doing. So I think and wish that at the town meeting that people give you the authority to go ahead and sell this property. And based on the number of applicants that you sort of kind of have at hand, here's 8 that's willing to buy. And make the best decision, get the right person on the property there. I think that's the way we ought to go.
Thank you. So one important thing is, so we paid roughly 2.6 million. We're not going to get that much back, but keep in mind a lot of that 2.6 million went to the development right with Cato Walmart or something like that.
Well, I'm looking for you to make anything.
Yeah. You'll probably be good faith there. SVT, you're next, please.
Hi, this is Lindsay Ketchum. I'm at 43 Blanchette Drive. We're Sudbury Valley trustees. Some interest, obviously, in this initiative and many others. I'm just curious if you have thought through what if and how to use the proceeds from the sale of the property, if that is the direction of the community, and are there ways to maybe tie in any of those proceeds to ensure it supports, I don't know, the vision and mission of the original family and agriculture and open space and those things? Just curious.
Okay. Do you want me to take it, or
Jen?
Okay. And Jen, you can follow up and correct me. So this is something that's been brought up recently, and it's important for us to feel as though we're honoring the Morrison and their vision. My thought individually is that if we have any money that comes from this proceed, we still have the remainder of the orchard that needs to be under our care. So that's also other lands, it's the lower barn as well. So I would like to make sure that we're taking care of that vision and making sure that if it's even helping redo the house, that the money is coming back into the property to bring it back to the value and their mission. If there's anything left over beyond that, obviously I wear my conservation hat. I would like to see that money go towards future purchases of preserving land. I don't know about some of the other commissioners, but this is something that's near and dear to a lot of us, is to make sure that we can put the money back into this particular property foremost.
The other thing that's been discussed is potentially putting it on to buy more farmland if it comes up, but we're not there yet. We've reached out to the finance committee, and it's complicated and under discussion, but I think all this group is to try to put it towards good use and the use it was intended for. Brian?
Brian Bell comes 15 Nagog Road. A couple of questions. One is, I'm curious about the well. Where is the well on the property?
Yep.
And is any knowledge about the well? Is it deep? Is it really viable? Has there been any testing on the water quality, pesticides, herbicides? Because if somebody's going to buy it, that's pretty important to know.
I can answer that because I was out with Skillings, the water department was gracious. Little water department was gracious enough to help partner this committee with Skillings that came out, and so we basically pulled the well, all the casings on our actual website on town. There's a whole report of how deep the well is. We did a test. The water is good for irrigation. We didn't go so far to test it for water.
For drinking water.
For drinking water, sorry, for drinking water. But all the data is right there. We have strong, at least 10 gallons per minute, so it would be good for irrigation. That is located when you're looking at the top barn, as soon as you drive in, instantly to the left. You'll see the manhole covers right there. There's a granite post that's kind of symbolic where you used to tie a cow or horse or cart to. Right there, you'll see that. But all that data is on the town website.
And the other, I just more of almost a comment too. Has it? I know you're looking at the entire property for sale, but has there been any discussion of breaking it in 2 parcels or anything like that?
Can't be divided.
We would need permission from the Department of Ag to break up the APR, and they frown on that quite a bit. I mean, one of the challenges in Massachusetts is getting large pieces of contiguous farmland, and that's a shortage. So breaking up the APR would be very difficult to do.
I wouldn't be talking like almost 2 APRs.
Yeah, they frown on that. I've been in discussions with them on that. So, ma'am, you had a question?
Yes, Tess Deegan, One Birch Road. You have community as part of one of the requirements for your applicant, and what do you envision the community will be able to do on that property? Would they be access it? I would love to see educational programs for children, access obviously maybe some kind of festivities, kind of thing. Is that your vision also, or?
Let me take a stab at that.
Yeah.
So I think that when we issue the RF, there's going to be a big set of criteria. In my opinion, the community should be one of them, and we can weight that. You know, this whole board is going to decide how we weight that relative to the other criteria. So There were some RFI applicants who were had educational aspirations for the property. There were some that were cooperative farming with immigrants, for example. There were, I think, a lot of different approaches to the farm. But ultimately, what we're going to have to do is pick an applicant that meets the most best criteria. And so that might or might include some community aspect. I hope it does, and I'm going to push for it, but we just don't know until we look at the applicants what it might include.
And that comes back to the working sessions. That's what we want to hear from you and from everyone. If that's foremost for you, and you can say community, what does it mean to you? Like, what would you like to see that mean? An education session, a time to be able to walk through the farm. So that's the information. That's why we're having this. And we talked about the
MAPC.
MAPC to do that. That's going to be a great forum to say this is most important to you and what that means, to define it a little closer.
Yeah, so me personally, if you're asking right now,
Yes.
I would love access to the farm in some way through pathways and learn about farming today in Massachusetts. I would love to see educational programs for children who might express an interest in becoming farmers, the process. I would love to also see some maybe art and other festivities on a property like that. I have loads of ideas.
That's great. And you can always send all your information, all your ideas to the email that's on the website as well. So that's how we're gathering the information.
Yeah,
And I think we all have the sense that the community wants something interactive. We're going to strive for that. But first things first, we need a farm that's going to be viable. And hopefully we'll get several of them, and we can weight our decision towards those that offer some of that interaction. But again, the viability. There were some proposals out there which weren't so good that had a lot of that, but we weren't convinced they could run the farm either. So we've got to see what we can get, but I think we will wait towards.
Well, I also wonder, could that be a revenue stream, right?
And most farms today do have something like that just for agritourism and to bring in extra money. So I do think we'll be able to achieve it, but I don't want to mislead anybody to think that we can promise that.
Yeah, and I think it would be a reasonable expectation to set for people that they will be starting their farm business first. They're like fix the cooling, they're going to pull some trees, they might replant trees, they may have some animals, they're going to turn the soil over.
He's telling me, don't yell to the mic. Yeah. You know, like they're going to start their farm business first. Doing community education is not about using food. It's about doing something else. And just from I ran a nonprofit farm here in Littleton, and community education, it's like, you know, you want to be, it's really hard, right? Like you want to do all these things, you want to be organic or you want to be regenerative, and so you start adding like it's a triple bottom line and then like a third bottom line, and then the education's like the fourth bottom line. Like you have to have be able to pay the employees to run those programs, and if you can't even afford to run your farm business, you're not going to start that yet. You have a pick your own apples. And that might not require a lot of staff, but in terms of like running programs for kids, that's an expertise, and you can hire people for that, but you still need to pay for it. And as far as I know, Drumlin Farm doesn't even break even on education programs. Like it's tough. So
I have one more. Like, you know, this is I in the process of doing this work with the working group, you know, I've really. You know, I sort of felt the same way you did, like everything should be community-based. But I look at that property now and it breaks my heart. Like it's beautiful and it was so abused for so many years, and I think it's a crime. So I have come around to Amy's excellent. It's a business. We want someone who's going to take care of that property the way it needs to be taken care of. And I feel like, unfortunately, like community for me, although it's very important, might have to take a back seat to finding someone who's really well qualified to run the farm.
At least temporarily.
Yeah.
Gentleman in the center, then Jack, and then Carrie. Yes, sir.
Councilman, you on 4 Richard Way. You mentioned that the orchard is out of compliance with APR for a couple of years. Do you know what are the minimum technical requirements to be in compliance with the?
I've been told they need to be, at least half of the APR land needs to be in production.
50% active agriculture.
What do you mean, how much what?
I mean, how many apples?
No, it needs to be commercial, so it can be a community garden or back garden or somebody's, pet project. It needs to be commercial, and at least half the APR needs to be in budget. And the judgment along that DAR utilizes every day.
My second question was about the water. When you did the property walk, you show us that the previous owner used to draw water from the lake.
We think.
So I can speak to that. So at one point we did draw from they draw from the reservoir, but then the Morrisons dug 2 irrigation ponds, and so the one behind the lower barn they refer to as the goose pond, and so. And so that could be one, if you were part of a lease, remember that part of APR land. So I don't know, you'd have to come in front of wetlands and perhaps others to make sure that you could do that again. That water went from the goose pond under the road, and then it went up towards where the rock fruit are, and then that was part of the surface irrigation system.
Farmers are allowed to draw from surface water. That is a drinking water, which might make it more complicated. There's nothing in there in the law that I can see that precludes it, but having been in these situations for a lot of time, the drinking supply has some issues with it. So.
But the pond is not part of drinking water.
Correct. All set. Jack, I'm going to ask you to unmute now. Oop, sorry, I just muted you again by accident.
Hi, this is actually Sarah, who was Sarah Buckle at 1 Sarah Double Road. But I wanted to ask if you guys are aware of some trash, huge traffic, bush scrap, concrete scrap, farming equipment. It's actually like, it's well behind the goose pond, okay? But if you keep going, there's like trails that take you to the reservoir, there's like this old abandoned shed, and it's full of like, okay, I see one of these nodding heads.
Yeah.
All kinds of mysterious items just everywhere, and if that's going to be addressed, removed. And the second question I had is that there's a chain link fence separating my backyard from Goose Pond. In fact, one of my dogs injured by previously, and I'm wondering if that could be removed. I mean, it could be replaced, but if that's what are you aware of that chain link fence? How do we get there? Can it be removed? Thank you so much.
Okay. So I tend to be the person who knows the property the best at times because I've walked it the most and the most history there. So Goose Pond does have a fence that was around it. I was not aware that it was in failure behind. So that's something I do not believe it can be removed because it could be a safety issue because the pond does have depth to it. So that's something we could potentially put on our repair list. The property, so that land is not in APR. So that's municipal land back there. That is available for lease. The property in the back is what we call wooded. You take the path, you go over the brook, and that structure back there is, I would say, 80% in failure. And there are old plastic tanks that are there. There's a great deal of scrattle that was there. When Charles vacated, he didn't clean up that area. There is some viable aluminum piping that's there for irrigation, but we have not discussed recently cleanup of that back area. It could be on the to-do list, but to be honest with you, it's not something that we've discussed a lot because our main focus has been on the APR land. I don't know if that answered your question.
Okay, Carrie, I've asked you to unmute if you want to go.
Hi, Carrie McHugh again, 13 Neshoba Road. And I'm just looking for some clarification, please. I was glad you had that microphone issue a moment ago because that relates to what I wanted to say. The woman at the far end of the table, I think you have a yellow, maybe a cream-colored sweater on. You don't get too close to that mic. That was a problem. I couldn't hear anything about what you said. And I'm pretty sure what you were saying was you were talking about when the orchard maybe was last in use. And I think kind of where you were going with it is, for instance, there have been no additional chemical applications on the property for 8 years or something like that. If you could please repeat what you know about that, I would love to hear it. And if anyone knows further about, you know, do those chemicals stick around forever like PFAS do? Or does that kind of improve the odds of that land being clean and usable and desirable?
Yep. So as part of the compliance with the Mass Department of Agriculture APR program, there's reporting. And the last time it was farmed and reported on was 2019. And so our strong belief that no chemical applications have been done since then. So in terms of meeting, you know, applying for certified organic, property can't have been sprayed in any way, shape, or form for 3 years. So it's already in the window of beginning that organic certification process if someone wanted to do that.
And
Yeah,
then the other
so for background, organic certification isn't a purity standard, it's a process standard, and they require 3 years of no chemical use before they can be certified. So if somebody wanted to come in and be organic, they're several steps ahead. They don't have to wait to get that preem while they're not applying chemicals. With that said, we've discussed whether require that people be organic and want to limit it to simply because we've had so few applicants so far.
Her other question was whether those chemicals stick around forever.
So the lead arsenate that was used in the past does. I can't really speak to this. I have a conflict of interest.
So we are obviously lay people at this table and not, I don't know that I'm qualified to speak to it because we haven't done testing. So we only have one test that one applicant did. I assume that there are still some residue there. We do know, and we talked about the arsenic. Littleton is known not just for the arsenic perhaps up where the orchard is, but we do have veins that kind of come through our town here. So I don't know that we're able to qualify our just answer for you, not knowing what is in the soil there.
Yeah, most chemicals since the 70s aren't terribly resistant. There's not a lot of herbicides where you want residual activity because they're perennial crops. They're usually insecticides, which are relatively short-lived.
And
that's
those,
a generalization.
Right. So. And those trees, many were planted in the 60s, 70s, 80s, which are still, some of them are still standing. They're not producing, but they're no longer viable also.
Right. Could it be advantageous to maybe do a little testing of the soil and kind of put in the marketing flyers, hey, this soil is good, you could come in with more new age practices, and maybe it was an advantage over some of the other properties in Massachusetts that are agricultural. Maybe it would be an advantage to throw out there, put a little money in to see what the quality of the soil is.
Right.
Obviously, if it's not good, it might be good. If it is good, it could be helpful in just the whole desirability of the property.
Right, and I think and we had this discussion very early on years back, and it seems like we had annually, not knowing who is going to be the next farmer, we didn't honestly want to invest the finances for the town of not knowing, because if I'm going to go in and put in berries or hay fields, it might be different than someone that's trying to grow a leaf vegetable. So it is something that we've discussed, but we didn't think it was viable for this committee at the present time.
Yeah, the other half of that is we're a little bit concerned about liability. If we did testing and represented it, somebody would come in and put, a lettuce field at one corner we didn't test, it contaminated. So essentially we've left it up to the applicants to do that testing.
And I assume we will allow for the RFP applicants to come in and do testing. Absolutely. We've always been very open that if you want to come in and test, just let us know and we'll have someone there to help.
Yeah, in soil science, it's super complicated. I'm not even going to try to learn anything about it. But, depending on what types of crops you want to grow, you're going to run different soil tests. Yeah. So there's just in there's their own complexities.
Yeah. So
it's
not like an air quality test.
Yeah.
And anytime they test for chemicals, they go and test for different nutrients and micronutrients that are specific to the crops they want to grow, so it makes some sense to do it all at the same time.
This is on the website, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I know
Yeah,
it's not
so
Jack,
you should
I
see
forget, I forgot your first name, Ms. Burkholz.
So if I can just add one thing, on our website, we do have the test data of the one that was done, and it's actually really cool to look at. So what they had pulled their samples for.
Yeah, hay, no, it was brambles, grasses.
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's 3 separate test components that are on the website.
Ms. Burkholz.
Yes, hi. I just want to say, never mind.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
And just to kind of address the organic piece a little bit. So if you're organic, so first of all, that property hasn't been farmed in a while. The invasives are like out of control over there. And so one of the challenges any farmer's going to have if they're putting in, raised beds, whatever, to grow vegetables, like the weed pressure is going to be super, super intense. And so in order to deal with that, you need to hire a lot of labor to pull weeds, unless you buy some sort of like fancy tractor that I never had to do the weeding for you. I think, I'm ran an organic farm, like I'm not super chemicals, but like I think where chemicals become problematic is when you use them problematically. So, it's going to be, to restrict someone to be organic could be like the death knell. I mean, there's a town in Raynham that said the cranberry bog had to be organic. Did I hear that from you?
No.
Maybe I heard it from the woman who runs Farm Bureau. They had an RFP. They required organic for this cranberry bog, and something, whatever, fungus disease, I have no idea, broke out, and their farm went out of business because they couldn't use anything to treat it with. So,
what I will say is most farmers in Massachusetts follow called integrated pest management, which is a kind of a rational approach where they take not only chemicals, but mechanical and biological, and they integrate them. UMass Amherst, at least until recently, has been really a leader in IPM, and it makes sense for the farmers. Most of them end up spending less money in time, labor, and chemicals doing it, so there's a financial incentive, even if there's not the environmental incentive. And this has been a leader in orchard IPM. So doesn't make everybody happy who wants no chemicals, but I will say Massachusetts, as far as responsible chemical use, is probably leader in the country.
yeah, and the 2 major farms here in Littleton that grow vegetables, they're IPM, and I think they do it very responsibly. And some of the best applicants that we had are going to be using animals because animals are a great way to push back your invasives. Like sheep, they'll eat anything.
Jen, do you want to talk about the flyer that you had made available for people coming in?
Oh, that was the fax that was in use.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just saw some people want to make sure that they know that in the back room, was it
Frequently asked
the
questions. That was the
FAQs.
flyer?
Yeah, there's flyers back there. There should be enough for everyone if you'd like to.
May Online had a question?
Yes, I'm Mary Martin. I'm at 8 Applery Lane. And have a question concerning the vote. If the vote does not pass for the selectmen to make decisions, if the vote doesn't pass, what's the plan after that?
We will have to find a way to authorize the select board to sell it, which would require another town vote, I believe. So it would either have to wait until the fall town meeting or have to do a special town meeting just for the vote. But either way, it would probably be a 6-month delay.
Which could potentially mean that the new farmer coming in could actually miss 2 years. And we would be on the hook for maintaining the property to get it to that point.
Yeah. You want to talk about what oversight MDR has over our property? If we
Sure. So because we basically have a contract with the state and they basically hold the restriction, we own the property, the State Department of Ag has the restriction, there are a couple options they have if we don't farm this. The first one is an affirmative covenant to farm, where they can essentially find somebody and say, we don't care, we haven't done this, Littleton, we'll send this person into farm. I don't think that's likely because they're going to run into all the challenges we have finding somebody to farm, but they do have that right. The second one, and Amy has a headline up there, a newspaper article where the Attorney General's actually sued somebody for neglecting an APR farm on the Cape. It's a little bit different where he was allowing vandalism, and we're actually trying to do it. We stopped doing that. It'd be a little harder for the Attorney General to sue a town than versus an individual, but that's an option as well. Anyway, so I'm not sure we actually have a contingency plan if the town doesn't want to sell it. It's been discussed, but I don't think we're quite ready for that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Hopefully, we won't. Yes, sir.
George Sanders, 682 Great Wood. Has any of the farmers in the town of Littleton been interested in this?
No, not to my knowledge. But you don't need to respond to the RFI in order to respond to RFP. And I've spoken to a couple parties who specifically said that they did not respond to the RFI because they didn't want anyone knowing what their plan was. Right. So it's entirely possible that someone in Littleton could respond to the RFP with a strong submission.
Thank you.
Done.
So, Don McIver, 43 Foster Street. My major concerns are the criteria in the RFP and the approvals process. And I guess I should point out the last 5 years I'm involved with trying to protect conservation lands, especially in that area. I can name about a dozen, but also, not all by myself, but I think way back when the Morrison farm was purchased, certainly Sarah was very much involved with it from the Conservation Commission. And one of the groups I was with actually gave an award to Eunice Morrison, who was 97, because no one else in town thanked her for what she was doing, which was a major change. So I've seen that people have been involved with this, and I've been busy doing other things. So I hadn't gone directly focused on this until the meeting in this room at the Selectmen's meeting, where Town Council said they recommended selling the property. And originally I was against that because it was fragmenting this whole area that has a lot of community interests. But it's been shown quite well the town is not capable of managing it, that other people could, as a matter of how do you do that in a good, sustainable manner. So I've been focusing on that, and since then I've been involved with all the meetings and have made various suggestions. Some appreciated, some not, but nonetheless, I think it's important to do this in a good manner. And I'm also glad that at some point, after several would seem like defeats or challenging situations, you've come back and said, okay, let's do this the right way. So I'm very much in favor of that. Certainly your committee deserves a lot of credit for persistence in trying to do things, and I think that's well borne out if you read the timeline that Jen and Amy put together. It's been a long struggle, and a lot of people before you have tried to accomplish that too. So I have some current recommendations for the criteria in the RFP, because I think that's very important. We've all pulled together and worked very well, got very good responses, 15 quality responses for the RFI, and that was a collective effort of getting nonprofits and for-profits and anyone that might be interested. So in some ways, there are a lot of things going for us. The ag requirements, you pretty much have figured out, nailed down, and explored, and which is good. I mean, that's the must-haves. And I think one of my concerns is assurance that the purchaser of the agricultural operation has some sustainability. It isn't really dependent upon one individual's health, well-being, finances, or anything else of that nature. And we've seen how hard it was trying to get succession planning with the last person that operated the farm there. So, with the Canada's established public interest nonprofits, they're mission-based. They're not financially based and get grants. So, in some ways, they already have that in place. And I would think, in general, whoever applies, either nonprofit or for-profit, have something in place that assures it isn't just a fix for the current situation, but it's ongoing. Maybe it's a family trust, maybe, something that isn't dependent upon an individual or a family. And I think that's a major thing. Also, I would think if that person decides to sell for whatever reason, that it may be worthwhile having in your situation a right of first refusal. Not because you want to get into farming, but you may want to put a waiver on that, or you may want to transfer it to some other viable thing. I'm looking for the long term. Also, on the sale of the multifamily caretaker house, it's come up, someone going to buy it, flip it, make money, and not really serve the community. The best solution I've found from land use attorneys, and I go to a lot of meetings and conferences and quarterly meetings, is to actually put a deed restriction on it, where, given that it's so hard getting historic preservation designation on it, it takes a long time. Put something equivalent to that into the deed, and also escape clause, so if that's the route you're going to go, you can extinguish it and then put the historic preservation aspect on it. That's worked in several other communities, and it seems fairly viable. I would think also you may want to put on a prohibition of selling stone walls. That had been a concern before. And that's a big concern, especially in New England. And this is a special area with stone effigies, Native American ceremonial stone landscapes. Provisions like that are on sort of the equivalent of the APR designation on the conservation restriction. There are a number of prohibitions in there. And you should go in there and to see what you want to explicitly prohibit. There are a lot of good things, but stone walls is one of them, and we know it's a major factor in this area.
Sorry, Don, can I interrupt? Ask
Sure.
The stone wall limitation, is that something that goes on the deed, or how do you control that after it's sold?
Well, for a conservation restriction, which is the contract, is there, I think it's on the deed. There's certain things you can borrow, but the trick is work with an attorney that knows land use and conservation aspects and knows some of the case history of what works and what doesn't. And the state also is a great resource here, Division of Conservation Services.
Sure. And some people may not know that parts of the property are on a scenic road. So that's important, but also some people may not also know the significance of the stone walls because the former tenant did sell off some of the stones from the stone walls.
Yeah,
without our knowledge.
Yeah, and actually in the Smith land, while being the president of the Conservation Trust, I worked very hard with the attorney to make sure that nothing would happen. All the stonework around the Paul and Edith Smith house, formerly Whitcomb, it's an impressive set of stonework. And in that designation, we not only put prohibitions, but if, in fact, there was a proposal to sell it, that the right of first refusal be given to the town, and if it forever made sense to do that, that they move the stones close to the road, etc. So that eventually went into the deed. I guess they're selling the house to the family that's there now, but there's also conservation restriction that I wrote with the owner's attorney back then, and that also covers Cibarelli Trustee, which owns some of the property.
Okay.
So yeah, I think probably the deed restriction.
Yeah, and Sarah, just to, not to ask the question, in terms of like the property line, is the APR within the stone wall or is it on the other side of the stone wall?
Yeah, so it's a mix.
Yeah.
So we don't have the luxury of having four corners and this is the stone walls. There's some stone walls interior, there's some that are exterior, but through mapping, it's going to have to be resurveyed anyways. We can pick that detail up on the survey.
I think DIR actually protects the stone walls. They will allow you to move them if there's a need, but they don't allow you to sell the stone walls. It wouldn't hurt to put it in the deed as well. I agree.
Right. And you don't have to worry about where the stone walls are. I mean, say, for example, there were no stone walls in the APR. So be it. Yeah, no.
Right. Okay. Great. We appreciate that one.
So The next thing is really to focus on the entire Morrison property.
Is you're going to switch gears. The only thing I would say, so I see advantages and disadvantages to nonprofits versus for-profits. They both come with an advantage. While I agree, I mean, there's a lot to be said for a farm family owning a farm where it's their home, it's their livelihood, and there's a lot to be said for nonprofits which have a lot of money behind it. I think we've got to, so I don't think one necessarily it's a general outweighs the other.
I agree. I agree. Either one could be viable. And, yeah, the RFP should look at that. The thing I see with the mission-based nonprofit, they're already committed for a mission for longevity. And whoever farming group, you know, we don't have a farming family that's operated over time, and, you know, there's comfort. I see that in other communities. People see there's a long-term farming family that's gone to a town field, and they...
No, I think for a sale, anybody who buys it, I think they're going to put their blood, sweat, and tears. With that said, I can also see a nonprofit that may be better than them. So, but I don't lean one way or the other.
No, no, I think we're in agreement. So in the entire Morrison property, there's a lot of interest in there, and I see that Jen and Amy looked at the Morrison Property Management Plan, which the Conservation Commission endorsed. It had a lot of that history and a lot of the interest in there. So, yeah, I think referred to as community benefits beyond the agriculture. And, yeah, it's sort of honoring the Morrison vision. What I see included there as the interest in the whole property, this is the first subdivision of that in this century, you know. So I see it's a historic there's a history there, and a lot of us know the Praying Indian Plantation and the follow-on Newtown Indian Village was located there. So there's that history, and it really comes in two parts. There's what the Mass Bay Colony designated, and what they designated so the town could be created at the same time. There's all that, and then there's the cultural history that the Native Americans can best speak to. And in the adjacent Sarah Doublet land, there's been a lot, and I've gone for grants from Bureau of Interior, actually National Park Service, to do a cultural survey of all the stone effigies and stone rows that look like stone walls, but they have a different purpose. So I think you might want to communicate with them and see what they say. And, you know, in the state of these signs referred to as archaeological interest, but it's really Native American cultural ancestry. There's a scenic landscape, and there's a major scenic landscape there. One of the reasons why it was bought. There's the conservation aspect, is in the biomap area. On the adjacent Sarah Doublet land, we identified over 500 species.
So Don, if I can interject, because we want to be fair for everyone, so we don't know if there's other questions. So I thought this was very helpful for me for criteria, some of your suggestions. I'm excited that we have the opportunity to the MAPC, and that's where I think we can elaborate more on the criteria that you've shared and also about community as well. I don't want to give you more time than everyone else, so I want to make sure.
Okay, I can wrap up.
If you have any more like
minutes.
criteria or things, just 2 more minutes would be great.
Okay, and that's why I waited to hear what other people had to say,
great.
too.
Thank you.
So there's also the healthy ongoing agricultural soil, with or without arsenic, but, you know, the farming operation is also a landmark farm, you know, that in itself. And finally, harmonizing within the community. Does it fit within the community? You know, I think those are things that need to be addressed in some fashion. So the criteria types that you use in RFP in something like this usually comes in two different fashions. And there was a very helpful selectmen's meeting along with some of the members here last Monday about how you would go about it. And the idea was you have the criteria. This isn't just for best bid. This is for quality criteria.
A technical proposal and a price proposal. Yeah.
Yeah, and so in the same fashion, there are different types of criteria, often hard criteria. We know the agriculture agriculture are the hard criteria. It's either go or no go. They have to accommodate the agricultural needs. But the other needs, sometimes referred to as secondary criteria, I think, or community benefits, are these other things I mentioned as interests. See how people address it. Sort of additive. So an ideal candidate would score well across all things. Ideal. Vision. Hard criteria, agriculture, and all these community interests. The preferred candidate would score well on the agriculture.
Hey, Don, you're pushing up on that 2 minutes you promised.
Okay, but it's coming in. It's good to hear, and I'm sure of some of these other things that are additive.
And I think a lot of this will, when we have the criteria meetings, I think this is where we can see what everyone, and also, as we stated earlier, send in an email of what's important to you. But we do have two other.
We do have other
hands
people.
here.
Ben had his hand up before. Ben?
Well, can I just finish?
Can you please wrap it up, Don?
I will.
Thank you.
So when you go through this process, what's suggested in the Uniform Procurement Act, it talks about disposition of publicly owned lands, is that you look for the most advantageous. They suggest 3 ways: to high pass, pass, low pass, and acceptable. So I'm hoping that you would put this together. The final thing is that, a lot of people have trust in the integrity and into what you're doing. You have trust in the selectmen, all good intents. In some ways, you're in a better situation than anyone has been in the past for this. You have good working group, sympathetic select board, sympathetic town administration, engaged public.
When are you going to finish up?
Including the surrounding neighborhood, robust pool of applicants, and you're going to get someone there. It isn't by finances, but people are interested in the land. You'll find someone from your process.
Don, we're going to have to ask you to
close it up
stop.
there, please.
No, the final thing.
No, you already said the final thing.
No, this is
the third time that we've asked you to stop.
This
We're actually losing people, Don. You said the final thing, two things
this
ago.
has to
Please sit
deal.
down. Don, will you please sit down?
Don, please sit down. You
We're
will
all
have plenty of
asking you to
chances to
sit
address
down.
in the future. You've had more than anybody else, which you're happy to give, but other people need to speak.
Okay,
Jerry,
the public
someone just
Ben,
left.
can you-
Give people that have
Ben.
Someone just
heard.
left because they can't
Okay.
take it.
So we take someone that's not
waited
been heard.
patiently. I'm sorry, I forget about you before.
If someone that's heard, we talked about everyone being heard.
Yeah.
Gentleman in the back.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Bill Schmidt, 4 Kinlock Street. For the last RFP went out, I, as a member of the Agriculture Commission, went and talked to some of the local orchards. And every single one of them said they liked the idea of coming here, but the RFP was too restrictive. And that's exactly what they said. And, and I don't want that to occur again. If we go out for these, I went up and looked at the property. There's a lot of still viable trees up there. I'm not saying it's 50% or 25%, but there are a lot that are saved, that can be saved. So I just want to make sure that when we do go out, we're not too restrictive, that we knock everybody off.
So the intent is, I think Amy gave in her presentation, was really to be open as possible.
Yeah, and I would say, Bill, that one of the big differences here is that when you're going to sale versus when you're leasing, you have to read different criteria and a different set of standards that you need to hold the town to in order to protect itself. Once this RFP process is over, we won't own this land anymore, and it won't be, and we don't need to protect ourselves from exposure to liability anymore. If we're leasing, that exposure continues ad infinitum, and so the RFP has to be structured to take that into account, and it's got to be a lot more restrictive. It's sort of a vicious circle, right? You know, we have to be more restrictive to protect ourselves. The more restrictive we get, the less likely we are to get candidates, which is why leasing hasn't worked. The leasing opportunities haven't come in. So yes, when we're directing this one to sell, it's going to be as open as possible, and yeah, we're in full agreement that this needs to be, we're working at the maximum number of proposals in so that we have the choices.
And I believe that the commission that we've talked about is that in a perfect world, you'd have someone that purchases the APR and then wishes to go into a lease with us on the adjacent property so that you could have one caretaker, one stakeholder, and be able to help to develop that comfort level that everyone would feel good about.
Yeah, and I would also say that myself, Sarah Seward, and Jen Clancy are the original trio of the original group back in 2021. We lived through that process, through it word by word with the attorney. I completely understand, and the three of us were very clear when the group started up again that it needed to be different, because we understood that.
And it will be different.
So, yep. Vin, Joanne, and then the lady in the back.
Vin Stolo, Sarah Douglas. There was a question earlier about what happens if the warrant doesn't pass. It's my understanding that, and I'm asking this because I think there's some confusion out there. You folks can, in the select board, whoever does the actual negotiation on the RFP with the prospective purchaser, cannot even start that process until the warrant passes. Is that correct?
Correct. Everything comes to a grinding halt.
And it would likely mean another lost season.
Minimum.
No. Joanne.
Joanne Derry, Howard Avenue. I feel sad that the town's best option is to sell this beautiful asset. I love the looks. I know that if we sell it, it won't all remain an orchard. I hope it will still remain really beautiful. And for that reason, I hope that the Orchard Working Group will put a lot of consideration on the philosophy of the candidates that submit for the RFP. Once the land is sold, they pretty much do anything they want, as long as they don't violate the agricultural restrictions and don't need variances from the town. So, like, the way they think and how they feel about the land is important, and I hope that that will be a consideration. The land the orchard is on, I'm pretty sure it was part of the Neshoba Praying Indians land, and there's now a descendant of the Neshoba Praying Indians is the tenant at the Sarah Doublet House. I hope that if some of the applicants are from that community, that they would get a lot of consideration, because they seem to have a pretty copacetic philosophy with how the land would be used in protecting it for their future generations. And just because that land, having belonged to their ancestors, was stolen by our government of our country a long time ago, and it seems kind of weird to even ask them to buy it back. But if there were people from that community interested, I hope that they would get, a strong consideration.
There's a lady back. Yes, ma'am. You, yeah. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Lynn Mills, 32 Dover Road. I appreciate the comment that the gentleman here made. Sorry, I forget your name already. And it seems just slightly contradictory to kind of what's being proposed. I agree that when you think about the APR and selling it, that simplifies things from what had happened on the previous RFP because you were trying to lease it. But you're still talking about leasing land that the town owns. So if the proposers to the RFPs propose that they want to purchase the APR, but then at the same time simultaneously lease the other pieces, aren't you still going back to that same concept where you're going to have to dig in and figure out as the town how to craft this and deal with the same issue we were dealing with previously? I think you're kind of making that a little more simplified than it actually may end up being.
So our immediate focus is the APR, the orchard, and the house, and the barn. We've left it open for folks to lease it. I would say the top applicants that we reviewed from the RFI at this point haven't indicated an interest in leasing that. What I would frankly expect to happen is there's a lot of work on that 50 acres of farmland that already needs to take place. I think it's great to have a buffer around the farm so they don't impact on the neighbors with the chemicals and the noise and that sort of thing. It's also an option 10 years from now if the farm wants to, or 5 years from now, even if the farm wants to expand, to be able to lease that property next door. So my guess is it won't be immediate, but if somebody can handle it, we're open to that. And it's a little easier to lease because it doesn't have the restrictions on it. Well, there is a building associated with it, but we can't sell that, so that's the only option we have.
But also not part of this particular process.
Right.
If a lease is going to happen, it's going to happen as a separate process from this.
Can I ask a second question?
Sure.
Just as much as folks are concerned about who's going to purchase the APR, would it be reasonable to think that the person or the group that's considering purchasing APR would be concerned about towns then care for what's abutting them directly? So I think it can go both ways, and I think it should be looked at ways. And so I think as much as you guys are looking to sell the APR piece, I think you have to answer to what you all are going to do and what your plans are for the pieces you're going to continue to own. And I think that's responsible and reasonable to think about that a purchaser may be inhibited from even thinking about purchasing and basically owning the parcels that are now, you know what I mean? It's not really co-owning because they're owning the APR, but you're still owning the abutting land. And if you don't have a plan, what plan are you following for that piece? Do you see what I mean?
Sure, but nobody gets to pick their neighbors.
Right.
So,
you know, the town is
that's part of everyone's consideration, right? And it's a fair point that even if you're buying a house, you look at the houses next door and is this who I want as a neighbor? And it's a point well taken.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Saunders, I know you had your hand up.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. RFP, I think that the last time the select board went out on that, it was very narrow and restricted. And I think that we have to give credit where it's due, that Carol Morrison, the select person here, is the one to say, we need to open this thing up so that we can get more people.
Else here.
Well, it may have been
the
more
R5
than
was
that, but I
Karen's
know,
up here, so she gets a
I know
lot
you
of
were
credit.
speaking about that, so I'm saying that that sort of kind of helped because when we look at the number of people that came in on it, it clearly showed that there was interest after things changed. And I like this gentleman said over here that he had spoke to our farmers here, but it was too restricted. So that was good information to know because I'm sort of kind of wondering, well, why none of our people here in the town of Littleton is interested in this, you know? So I think that we need to concentrate on one thing, and that is to get this thing through the town and authorize the select board to be able to sell it, and then allow these other things to lease or do this, then you're in power to take care of some of those things. But the big thing right now is telling the people we need to sell it, and we need permission from you to give the select board the authority to do so. So I think you're on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody else had their hand up. I missed it. Yes, sir.
I'll put mine up in the lease. Charles Howe, 64 Newtown Road. I have a few questions. One, it seems like the town's more interested in selling the property than leasing the property. I attended one of the Zoom meetings quite a while ago. Probably was on the committees. That's how long ago it was. When you're starting to write up your RFPs. And I said, why don't you check to see what the town of Harvard did with their RFP? Because interesting enough, the orchards in Harvard are being run, town property in Harvard that has orchards are being taken care of by Carlson Orchards, that's actually running their orchards. So their RFP was not as restrictive as ours was for some reason. So I guess they don't have the same concerns or whatever concerns we have with the RFP restrictions.
So one of the challenges with our orchard is because we had a better chance of leasing it 15 or 20 years ago when it was still in decent shape. However, due to the neglect, I mean, to really get that up and running, you're talking seven figures. So to lease it to somebody without the town putting that money in is really prohibitive. I actually had a discussion with Carlson before he died about the Littleton Orchard, and he said he wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because of that very reason. It takes too much investment that nobody wants to put into leased land.
But it's kind of interesting you say that nobody wanted to do an RFP in town because it was stupid. No other orchard wanted to.
Yeah, so what we're saying is when we crafted the first RFP, it was like very intense. It was even really hard to read. It was all of those things. And it was a lease. And so one reason why people didn't apply was because it was just like very complicated to read. Two is because amount of investment that was needed to put in, no one wanted to do that, right? Like you wouldn't remodel my entire house, right? Because you don't live it. You're never going to see the return on investment, right? That's why no one wants to lease it, because they have to invest a ton of money into it and there's no return on investment for them. Like land is an asset, right? It's an asset class.
Well, I'm a little confused because people were interested, but the RFP was too restricted.
So we put out an RFI since that RFP, and we left that open to both. We basically, just if it was, tell us what you want to do with the property, either lease or buy. And we all reviewed them independently, and the only viable candidates who we thought had the background, who we thought had the financing and the farming experience and the business experience, all wanted to buy. So that, coupled with some of the other evidence of, the amount of money that would need to be invested into the lease, the fact that the town isn't in a position to invest in it, that we haven't particularly done a good job of stewarding it in the past, kind of led us to this point where at least the decision among us was our best course forward is to offer it rent.
And another question is, you said there was $100,000 in the budget next year. What's the $100,000 for?
Well, there's a lot of minor and major maintenance that needs to be done to the property. We need to keep mowing it to keep the invasives and the pests down. We need to do some repairs on the barn. There's still a lot of garbage there from when the pre-tenant was there. So we have asked the finance committee to allocate some money just to do the bare minimum of repairs to keep it from further deteriorating.
Is there an option, if this does not pass town meeting, just doing nothing and letting it go wild?
No, because that would violate the terms of the affirmative covenant, the covenant harm, which Brad Mitchell talked about. We are required to keep it in active agriculture, or the state will do it for us.
And if we were truly neglecting it, where we weren't, right now we've had discussions with them, they know we're working on it. If we hit a point where we didn't do anything, the state would be within their right to either do us or to basically maintain it so it'd be available for agriculture, and they've done that before, or if they could find somebody else to come in and farm it.
Right, then it becomes their responsibility to maintain it. All they have is all they own is the APR.
We own the APR, they hold restriction.
They own restriction, we own the land.
Right.
So if they're coming in and taking over the land for that, then they'd have to pay us due value of the land.
No, they wouldn't.
They have to pay us a penny.
They don't have to pay us anything, and they could actually sue us for neglect, for violating the terms of the APR.
So you're saying that if I'm a farmer, because these are made mostly for farmers, not for towns, correct? This program, the APR program, is made for farmers,
yes,
not for towns that buy.
Well, two parts. One is for farmers, so they have land available, and presumably there's some public good having that, I think, is the concept.
Right. So that's the main purpose of it.
Yes.
So you're telling me if I'm a farmer and I go into this, because they're buying the agricultural portion of the value of the property.
That's already been purchased with the restriction.
Right.
Yep.
The restriction. So if I'm a farmer and I don't farm my land, come in and put another farmer on my property.
Yes. If there's an APR on it, yes, that's correct.
If you've
Because
used
the
their
APR
money
is just a
to
restriction that it has to be used for farming. There's nowhere in there that says that you have to farm.
There's a permanent, so the newer
There's a
contracts, the old ones,
restriction.
so there's something called an affirmative covenant to farm, which basically says in the APR and the contract, the agreement between the town and the deed, that somebody has to farm it. It's very hard to enforce, but they will try.
And if you'd like to see a copy of that APR, the APR that's on the property is on the website as well. It's not fascinating reading, but it's
No,
good.
the APR system has changed over the years.
It has, so it really depends on which one you
The original ones didn't have that
have.
affirmative covenant to farm. The newer versions do.
Right, but the property was purchased before the newer ones came out, so I think the old
No, this
ones
one, for better or worse, this one has an affirmative covenant farm on it.
Yeah, and then just to address why other orchards in the area are not interested in it, or just someone, sorry, let me take it back, why an orchardist doesn't want to just come and run it as an orchard. So, you know, we've all been to places like Carlson's Orchard and, you know, all the other ones. What's the one?
Honeypot Hill.
Yeah. You know, they have like the beer tents and the ciders and the hayride and all of that stuff because that's what's making them the real money. There's no money in apples. I mean, like
different varieties too.
Yeah, there's, you know, you're going to make more money in like stone fruit. Like gone are the 1950s of the apple orchards. Like it's the commodities market. Like farms, apple farms in New England are competing with huge farms, apple farms out in like Washington. Like we get, I mean, there are times you can buy apples from New Zealand cheaper than here. Like that's what they're competing with.
So to put that in perspective, remember Very Fine was here?
Yeah.
So I had a discussion with Mo Tugas, who owns an orchard in Northborough. And he basically said they could get it's cheaper from New Zealand than they could from him because the cost of him driving from Northborough to Littleton exceeded what it cost them to get it from New Zealand. So apples are a tough business. Anybody who's driven by J.P. Sullivan around the Rotary and Air, you see a hell of a lot fewer apple crates out there and a lot fewer trucks over the last few years. It's a tough business.
The commodity market stinks for small farmers. You realize?
Anybody online? Questions?
Nope. So we have 10 minutes left. Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So we've heard some questions, you know, one of the things we've heard, you know, Carlson's has the cider and that sort of thing. How do folks feel about something like a cider tasting facility, you know, where there's but the alcohol in it, and I'm not leading it, but in my term, I wouldn't want it in my neighborhood to be honest, but I live on the other side now, but I'm curious how other folks feel that sort of operation where you do have traffic. You may have some people drinking.
Could have cider donuts too, though.
Cider donuts are okay. I'm okay with
It wouldn't have to be like until 11. You know, most of those kinds of things, it's just during days.
Yep.
And
How about like Gibbet Hill place?
Gibbet Hill,
Yeah.
They farm a little bit, and the rest of the area, it's
Yeah, I think the challenge with that idea is the APR program limits the amount of impervious surfaces. So I think just parking alone would make that like really impossible.
Unless we left the barn out of it. Melissa, I'm going to ask you to unmute. We have somebody online. Go ahead, Melissa.
As an abutter to the orchard and someone who would experience any disturbance from a cidery, I'm actually fine with it as long as it doesn't end up being a late night hootenanny kind of place, you know?
So, because the other thing we had some applicants who were very interested in running a venue there. Wedding venue.
But that's not farming.
Which would go late.
Well,
I'd rather have the cidery.
what's that?
Yeah, but you can have a wedding. You can run, you know, 4 weddings a year, and it's an auxiliary. Like the main focus is farming, and if you did like 4 weddings a year, that's not like a problem.
There are farms that do weddings, and there are also wedding venues with agricultural themes.
Yeah, it's no different than doing farm-based education. It's like an auxiliary to the main focus.
We have Carrie. Carrie, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, so I live on the Shore Road. We already have a huge amount of traffic that goes up and down that road because it's kind of a cutover road. So personally, I can speak for everyone on our road. I don't think we'd want that extra traffic, but it kind of comes around, I think, these things that we're asking about right now, the wedding venues or cider tasting, you know, alcoholic kind of things. It's almost like the woman who really wanted to get educational programs and stuff. And I think, you know, you all answered that pretty well. It's like, this is a lot of land. If people are going to buy this land, that's not going to make them enough money any more than the educational program going to make them money. It's got to be a farm first. I can't imagine anyone's going to want to buy that on land and not have it be a farm first. And I think that's just going to take, it's, you know, it needs to be well established before they can start adding those other things. I don't know, I'm not business, so maybe I'm totally wrong there, but I just don't know would people make that kind of money. And I don't know. I think there's already a big enough problem with drinking and driving. And I don't know about you folks, but when I go out to clean up the road along here, like my mailboxes across the street, it's horrifying. All the booze bottles I find by the side of the road. And I'm thinking all those people are clearly driving drunk. And I don't know. I would rather keep the alcohol. I think we've got enough issues. With people drinking.
Well, I don't want it to dominate the meeting, but I did want to raise it for future meetings that we have had proposals to have both alcohol and events there. I think the APR, particularly if they take in the will limit that quite a bit, but we have had proposals along those lines. It's something to think about for the upcoming MAPC meetings as well. Anybody else? Joanne?
We have not scheduled them yet, but we will.
We have to get past town meeting first.
To sell yet.
Yes, sir.
John Tully, 12 Berry Bush Road, and I've lived. My road is starts just. I live down the end of a cul-de-sac across from the orchard. And I've been there over 50 years, watching while John Morrison ran a very well-maintained orchard. His Mrs. Morrison, after his passing, did her best to continue it, but it's almost criminal what's the condition it's in now. And so I think anything that can be done to get someone, and I understand why selling rather than leasing is on the table, because the substantial expenditure to bring the property back into even a partial decent condition is going to be considerable. But anything can be that can be done to do that has to be done. And there are all sorts of other ancillary uses that can be the property can be put to, but the first thing is getting it back in a decent operation, and hope you can do that.
Amen.
Agreed. Thank you.
Please come to town meeting.
Bring your
stay.
Mr. Sanders.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. I just want to thank you all. I think this was a well-planned meeting here. We gave people the opportunity to speak time after time after time. And you don't always find that with our committees and boards in this town. So I want to commend you for taking that opportunity and being patient here and hearing what people have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. There will be future opportunities as well, and I hope you all partake in those.
Well, thank you for all the work you guys did. Thank you very much.
I make a motion that we close
Oh, it's just, we get a couple minutes. Any other questions, statements, either online or in the room?
Nope.
Nope.
Kristen.
Hi, Kristen.
You wrote a great article in the Conservation Trust. I was like, I don't have her phone number to call her and thank her. Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Zokis, Cottage Way. I just, after reading the APR on page 25, it talks about the conservation plan that is supposed to be followed, and I haven't heard a whole lot about that at meetings. That's what the USDA does the monitoring, and they said that a plan is supposed to be followed, and then they're supposed to be allowing monitoring. So I was just wondering if you guys might be able to speak to that, or is that something that'll be also?
I can't speak to the conservation, I'm not familiar, but DAR typically sends in an AR inspector every other year to make sure that the orchard's being farmed and consistent with the restriction itself. But I can ask about that conservation plan. I'm not certain.
I can double check on that, but they do count. And so a report is submitted every year. And so on the website, I think you'll see it from 19, 20, 21, all the way up through this past year. I think because it abuts that conservation land and other lands, that's why I think there's special concern. Talk about invasives to make sure it's the invasives are not crossing over as well. But I will double check on that for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.